When Obito became the Jinchuriki of the Ten Tails, he went through one of the worst nerfings in the Naruto series. Now obviously his Ten Tails version is more powerful than his non-Ten Tails versions, however, Obito lost the ability to use Kamui. And Kamui was the jutsu that made Obito. In his entire ninja career, he spammed that jutsu to no end, and that was pretty much all he did. And through that jutsu alone, he became one of the strongest characters in the verse. And now, when he is the Jinchuriki of the Ten Tails, he doesn't have that anymore. So you get this massive buff by being the Jinchuriki of the Ten Tails, but also you lose a lot when you can't use Kamui. But why? Why can't Obito use it anymore? As always, there are two explanations, one that's out of universe and one that's in universe. And I'm going to be going over them both. Now, let's start off with the out-of-universe explanation, which is a little bit easier to explain. The reason why Kishimoto decided Obito wouldn't have Kamui when he becomes the Jinchuriki of the Ten Tails is so that the character is more reasonable to fight against. When Obito acquires the Ten Tails, Hashirama himself, the god of shinobi, says, "Yeah, that dude is stronger than I am." Obito becomes extremely fast, being able to blitz Tobirama, Hashirama, even Minato. He has so much more raw power, and he also has the truth-seeking orbs, which is essentially the strongest ninjutsu in the series, a KK Mora, which is a combination of every single nature transformation. They are incredibly versatile, being able to attack and defend extremely well. And when Obito stabilizes his Jinchuriki form, he gains the ability to nullify ninjutsu. So essentially, regular ninjutsu does not affect the guy. You have to hit him with jutsu that are laced with nature energy or just raw taijutsu. And yes, obviously the Jinchuriki of the Ten Tails needs to be powerful and have this godlike aura to him because it's the Ten Tails. It's the combination of every single tail beast where the Akatsuki worked for the entire series, and when you absorb that tail beast, you should have these types of abilities. And Obito already felt very powerful there. The main characters had a very hard time beating him, so imagine if Obito also had Kamui on top of that. Imagine if, even if the characters managed to circumvent the defenses of the truth-seeking orbs and Obito's invulnerability to ninjutsu, he could still phase through their attacks. That would make him practically impossible to fight against. Not to mention that, if Obito had access to his phasing ability while he was the Jinchuriki of the Ten Tails, it's likely that he would be able to phase and use the truth-seeking orbs at the same time. What do you think would happen? Would the truth-seeking orbs also phase through and be teleported to the Kamui dimension when Obito is using the ability? Or would Obito's body phase, but the truth-seeking orbs will remain in the regular dimension, and so Obito would be able to use them to attack at the same time as he is phasing? That would just be insanely OP, because yeah, usually the way you go about countering Obito's phasing ability is by attacking him so that he can't attack you. But if he can attack you with truth-seeking orbs, the most powerful ninjutsu in the series, then there isn't much you can do about it. Or is there? Well, there are ways to circumvent that if Kishimoto so chose. Obviously, writing the fights would be much more difficult. You'd have to come up with even cleverer strategies for the main characters, maybe a few more jutsus for them to use, but there could have been ways to go about it. Now, the final blow that Obito takes from the majestic attire Susanoo that Naruto and Sasuke use wouldn't really be possible if Obito could phase, because yeah, he would just phase through the sword and that's it, he wouldn't take any damage. So a lot of the things would have to change if Kishimoto wanted to give Obito Kamui there. Would it make the battle more difficult? Absolutely it would. But maybe instead of just giving a Rasengan for every member of the Konoha 12 to use on the Nine Tails' tails, Kishimoto could actually have given them a real part to play in the fight. Now obviously they wouldn't be as impactful as Naruto, Sasuke, Minato, or Tobirama, but still, some of those characters have interesting abilities that could probably go around Kamui. Like Shino's bugs, for example, like Ino's mind transferring jutsu, or even Shikamaru's shadow possession because the shadows can't phase. So maybe Shikamaru can even catch Obito when he is still phasing with his shadow. Oh yeah, he probably wouldn't be able to hold Juubito for very long with his shadow possession, but still, Kishimoto could have made Obito use Kamui from just a mechanical writing standpoint if he wanted to and still make him lose. It would just require way more work, more characters involved, and a completely different resolution. But he chose not to make the character a bit more reasonable to fight against. So now let's look at this nerf from an in-universe perspective. Why the character Obito can't use Kamui when he becomes the Jinchuriki. And the first thing people may point out is that it makes no sense for Obito not to use Kamui because Madara, when he becomes the Jinchuriki of the Ten Tails, he steals Kakashi's Mangekyou, puts it on his own socket, and Kamui's himself into the Kamui dimension. And yeah, that's a very iffy scene. I can make a video about that later. But you have to understand that what Madara did there wasn't exactly what Obito had to do during the fight. Obito's Kamui has two basic functions. He can make Obito intangible so he can phase through everything, or he can suck people into the Kamui dimension. Obito can't use those functions at the same time, so when he is sucking somebody in, he cannot phase, leaving him exposed. And that was his preferred method of killing people before. Sucking them into the Kamui dimension, leaving them there stranded forever until they die or of thirst or whatever. But the thing is, it would make no sense for Obito to use the sucking Kamui ability during the fight against Naruto, Sasuke, Minato, and Tobirama, because those characters already knew the weaknesses of Kamui. If somebody is inside the Kamui dimension, he can attack from within when Obito phases, and Obito can't do anything about it. That's how they were able to damage Obito before he became a Jinchuriki, so Obito wouldn't want to use an ability to leave him exposed like that. And then you may say, well, but if Obito can't even phase when he's a Jinchuriki of the Ten Tails, it doesn't matter if he sucks somebody into Kamui, because they're not going to be able to attack him from within anyway. And to that I say, that's true. However, the sucking ability of Kamui requires a few things. If Obito wants to do that fast, he needs to touch the target, which he does several times in his non-Jinchuriki form. However, when he has access to the truth-seeking orbs, if he touches the target, it would be simply much more effective to slash the target with a truth-seeking orb, which can deal a lot more damage, and it is much faster than sucking somebody into Kamui. And Obito does that several times during the fight. He slashes Minato's arm with the Truth-Seeking Orbs, for example, with his staff. And the Truth-Seeking Orbs also work from a range. Obito's Kamui doesn't. So what I'm getting to here is that Obito sucking people into Kamui wasn't really something he would want to do as the Ten Tails Jinchuriki because it wouldn't serve him any purpose. So maybe he was able to do that, but he chose not to because there was no point. So in theory, Obito would be able to do the same thing Madara did as the Jinchuriki of the Ten Tails, which is to suck himself into Kamui and that's it. And then you may say, well, but if he wasn't able to use the phasing ability, how would he just suck himself into Kamui to disappear? But the thing is, those two abilities are very different. And we know for sure Obito couldn't phase because he took several attacks as the Ten Tails Jinchuriki, which he would otherwise just phase through. That certainly was a limitation of the Ten Tails version because that ability would have come in handy a lot. But why would that ability be unavailable at that point? The phasing ability is very different from the sucking ability. Even the sucking ability when Obito is using it on himself is completely different from phasing because if Obito is entering Kamui and somebody attacks him before he's completely teleported away, they can still do damage because Obito is not phasing. A possibility that I've seen being brought up is that Obito's eye didn't acclimate itself to the chakra of the Ten Tails. Especially because Obito was an imperfect version of the Ten Tails Jinchuriki because the chakra from all tail beasts was incomplete. Maybe the Sharingan was simply unable to teleport the sections of Obito's body to the Kamui dimension for him to phase because the chakra was simply too alien. That would especially make sense for when Obito was in his unstable Ten Tails Jinchuriki version when he's attacking everyone without even knowing what he is doing and he doesn't even recognize his own name anymore. But then I guess you could say if that was the case, he should have gained the ability to use Kamui again when he stabilized the tail beast inside of him after he was almost ripped apart. But then I say, Perhaps what he got there was a power-up for sure, but it was just control over the powers of the tail beast. The chakra itself was still alien, and Obito's Mangekyou Sharingan wasn't attuned to it. The phasing ability of Kamui is something very refined. It's sending specific sections of your body to the Kamui dimension, teleporting them instantly so that they are not hit in the real world. So if the Mangekyou Sharingan doesn't register those sections of your body, or if the chakra doesn't allow for the teleportation, then Obito simply wouldn't be able to phase. And maybe if Obito had remained the Jinchuriki of the Ten Tails for longer, eventually his Mangekyou Sharingan would get used to that chakra and allow him to phase. That would have been a good way to up the stakes in the fight. Oh, maybe Naruto and Sasuke are finally gonna hit Obito, but oh no. He finally regained his ability to phase at the worst possible moment. That would make the situation much more desperate and the fight even more exciting. Another possibility as to why Obito couldn't use Kamui anymore was that he simply couldn't transport that massive amount of chakra into the Kamui dimension. And then you may say, well, but Madara was able to. And even Kakashi, with his Kamui, was able to absorb and regurgitate the 8 tails out of his Kamui when they were fighting against the 10 tails. So what gives? Why wouldn't Obito be able to do that? But that's when you have to keep in mind that the sucking ability and the phasing ability are very different. When you're absorbing something into Kamui, what matters is the size of that thing. 10 Tails Madara was the size of a regular human. So even though he had a gargantuan amount of chakra, teleporting him into Kamui would be the same as teleporting anybody else. Kakashi teleporting the 8 Tails is a pretty big feat because the 8 Tails is enormous, but you also have to remember that what Kakashi sucked into Kamui was actually just one of the 8 Tails' tails, and when he squirted that out, the tail itself became the 8 Tails, so he didn't absorb the entire tail beast into Kamui. But regardless of that, it wouldn't have mattered, because the amount of chakra when you're just sucking someone in is irrelevant. It's the size that matters. However, because the phasing ability is so different, and it's literally taking sections of your body separately into the Kamui dimension without you having to activate that whirly effect of the Kamui ability, it's safe to assume that the more chakra that specific section of your body has, the more difficult it'll be to transport into Kamui. So during his entire life, Obito was using to transport his regular self into the Kamui dimension. Sure, he grew his powers as he grew up, he became more powerful, he gained more chakra, but the power of his Mangekyou Sharingan increased alongside that. However, when all of a sudden Obito shoves an entire 10 Tails into himself, he gained an exponentially larger amount of chakra. An additional reserve of chakra and just raw power dozens, if not hundreds of times larger than Obito's when he wasn't the Jinchuriki, and yet his Mangekyou Sharingan remained the same. It couldn't accompany that type of evolution so fast, and therefore it wasn't able to send so much chakra phasing through the Kamui dimension. And why not a combination of both explanations, really? The alien quality of the chakra combined with its sheer volume. That simply overloaded Obito's Mangekyou Sharingan and made it impossible for him to phase. Maybe he would be able to use the sucking ability of Kamui, but as I said, it wouldn't have been useful in that fight. Or maybe he wouldn't be able to even use that, because the power, the sheer volume of chakra of the 10 Tails would be interfering with the ability to use the Sharingan in any way. And then obviously you can justify Madara doing that because he's simply better than Obito in every single aspect of the shinobi art, on top of being a much more perfected version of the 10-tailed Jinchuriki, even though it wasn't yet a completed version because Naruto still had 50% of the 9 tails. Watch the video showing up on your screen right now for more cool Naruto content. Like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe and ring notifications, those things really help. And yeah, make sure to ring that bell. They'll make sure you get notified whenever a video comes out. Thank you so much for watching.